a solution for Venezuela. It marks a delicate turning point for a country confronted with deep political and economic challenges. Yet, it may be a window to pursue democracy, stability and prosperity. The European Union will continue to support democracy in a country where nearly 1 million Europeans live. The EU has been consistent, as reflected in my statement of 4th of January, supported by 26 member states. Our priorities are clear. First, Maduro lacked the legitimacy of a democratically elected leader. His rule was marked by systematic violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The people of Venezuela deserve better. But let me be clear, democratic illegitimacy does not suspend international law. Respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity is non-negotiable. Members of the United Nations Security Council bear a particular responsibility to uphold these principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Second, the future of Venezuela must be determined by Venezuelans themselves. The EU supports a peaceful, negotiated and fully inclusive process, grounded in the Constitution that will restore democracy. We continue to stand by all those defending democratic values inside and outside Venezuela. Translating the democratic will of the Venezuelan people into democratic governance, rule of law and fair and free elections is best and most sustainable path forward. And third, now more than ever, we must demand respect for human rights and the immediate release of all remaining political prisoners and persons in arbitrary detention. I'm pleased to report that more than 20 EU citizens have regained their freedom. I have spoken personally with several of them and want to thank the External Action Service and our delegation in Caracas, in close coordination with our member states, for their tireless diplomatic work. These releases are a positive and constructive step, but they must lead to a full restoration of human rights across Venezuela. Fourth, Europe's commitment to Venezuela and its people is clear. Europeans and Venezuelans share long-standing human, cultural and economic ties. The EU has remained present through the most difficult periods, including as the leading humanitarian donor. We are committed to working with all Venezuelans, from the authorities currently in power, led by the interim President Delcy Rodriguez, to civil society and democratic forces, to advance our interests and principles. Last week, our EU head of mission in Caracas met with the interim President Delcy Rodriguez at her invitation. They convened 3 points. First, the immediate and unconditional release of all detainees. Second, our readiness to deepen engagement if Venezuela takes tangible steps towards respect of human rights and the rule of law. And third, our commitment to support peaceful, negotiated and inclusive process led by Venezuelans towards democracy. Honourable members, Latin America and the Caribbean remain regions where the EU is well positioned to advance values and interests, including the economy. Our recent signing of the Mercosur agreement creates the world's biggest free trade area with 700 million people is a concrete example. It is a geostrategic choice. In a time when some are pushing away partners, Europe is seeking more of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice President. And now we will start with a round of speakers on behalf of the political groups, and beginning with EPP and Mr. Mato for 1.5 minutes, please.
Gracias, Presidenta, querida Vicepresidenta.
Thank you very much, President, Vice President. At this rostrum, I've often spoken out against dictator Maduro and what he's done to the people of Venezuela. The silence following the exit of the tyrant has also been suspicious, and giving the Peace Prize to Marina Corina Machado, we've had forced disappearances, torture, disappearances, repression for so long has been the day-to-day life of Venezuelans. This constant state of fear and oppression. 7 million Venezuelans forced to leave the country. It's the biggest diaspora in modern history. And now, fortunately, we can talk about hope for the future, for the people of Venezuela, their desire to recover peace, freedom and democracy. It appeared naive to think that the regime would fall under its own weight. And we do need to recall that he usurped power in 2024, ignored the will of the immense majority of Venezuelans who voted for Edmundo González, who is the legitimate president of Venezuela. Now a new chapter opens for the people of Venezuela and for freedom. Venezuela will get full support from the EU, from the European Parliament, for a peaceful democratic transition, and as I say, it must be led by Venezuelans themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Parin for 2 minutes, please, on behalf of S&D.
Thank you very much, Ms. Callas. In this chamber, we have been following closely what has been happening in Venezuela in economic, social, democratic and political terms. We've witnessed a decline, and we're very concerned about human rights, political rights, and particularly concerned about people who've been forcibly displaced and political prisoners. We've adopted resolutions, we've worked on resolutions, and one of our resolutions completely rejects the electoral fraud which was perpetrated by Maduro and his acolytes. And we also describe his usurping power as illegitimate. The international community recognises Edmundo González as a winner of the election, and he has left Venezuela, obviously, and is still in Spain. There are many people who have been imprisoned. We need to increase the sanctions. We need to strengthen them. We need to support Venezuela's civil society. As time moves on, we see that a year's gone under the bridge. Much water's gone under the bridge. Maduro robbed the elections. Trump is only interested in oil. There is much conflict still in society, but we need to work towards dialogue and respect, peace, democracy and progress for in and of itself. We as socialists do not want to see the law of might is right. We don't want the US doing what it's doing elsewhere in Venezuela. And we therefore want to grasp this opportunity. We think there is a window of opportunity for us to achieve some democratic process and achieve stability, which is what the democratic majority in Venezuela wants. Certainly, prisoners have been freed. This is good news, but we are going to keep vigilant, and we are not going to descend into a tit-for-tat exchanges of abuse. We are going to ensure that we continue to fight for democracy and for freedom.
Is Mr. Terch for 1.5 minutes on behalf of PFE, please.
Buenas gracias.
Thank you very much. We were talking about Iran a moment ago. If the US manages to do away with the Ayatollah regime, they'll turn Donald Trump into a national hero, and there will be regime change in Iran, and the EU will be up in arms saying how terrible Trump is for infringing international law. That's what happened with Venezuela for decades. In a similar way to with the criminal Cuban regime, the EU was supporting that regime. It would have been there forever, like the Cuban regime, if it were for the Europeans. And Maduro would have died in bed like Castro if it had been left to Europeans. But socialism, drugs trafficking, and Islamic terrorism going hand in hand was enough. Trump said enough is enough. Historic resistance by a very brave woman, Maria Corina Machado, showing the world that there was support from the people through those miraculous actions, calling for help from the US, and it arrived on the 3rd of January. The people of Venezuela celebrated that, but Europeans are up in arms. Europeans just can't stand Trump doing well. They don't like to see Trump doing the right thing. And yes, there are political prisoners, and there are still a lot of things to be put right. But it is a step on the path to democracy. Democracy will come sooner rather than later now, and that is despite the EU.
Mr. Cavadagna for 1 minute on behalf of ECR, please.
Grazie, President.
Thank you very much, President. Well, it seems like we've finally woken up. That we've got defenders of international law, academics, people who say that they have got competences into international law beyond the heads of everyone else. But where is international law when a communist regime, Maduro's regime, decides to lock people up? Where were all of these proponents of international law when the communist Maduro regime was closing down the opponent's speech? Where were the experts in international law when so many Venezuelans were forced to flee their country simply because they did not share the ideas of the so-called legitimate president of Venezuela? They saw their fundamental rights violated. And Europe may well be the cradle of international law and fundamental rights, but what has happened here has to be supported. A despot has been overturned. And this is a population that deserves its freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Aguirre-Goitia Martinez for 1 minute on behalf of Renew, please.
Alta representante.
Thank you, High Representative. The military intervention on the part of Trump is a clear violation of international law and the UN Charter. We've already said this. And this sort of incursion sets a very alarming precedent. We need sustainable peace, democratic legitimacy and justice, and this cannot be guaranteed through the military intervention. Venezuela needs to have a future, a democratic future. Maduro was not a legitimate ruler of Venezuela. It is good that he is no longer there, but right now we need to address the issues that there are. The regime is still in power, enabled by Donald Trump. Although some political prisoners have been released, many more are still held. We demand that all these political prisoners who were arbitrarily detained are released. Change must come to Venezuela. It must come from within, from the people. And Europe must defend the rule of law in a genuine way, not by double standards. Might is right must come to an end. This is no way for any country to be governed, and Europe must recognise that it could play the role of a genuine global power, were it to engage in strategic alliances with Latin American leaders on a democratic, just, fair and balanced basis. Thank you.
Is Ms. Miranda Paz for 1 minute on behalf of the Greens, please.
La injerencia y agresión militar.
Illegal and illegitimate military intervention and interference is an attack on the sovereignty of peoples. This imperialistic intervention by Trump leads us to express our solidarity with the people of Venezuela. The Monroe Doctrine 3.0 and the new hegemony through war, fake news and military aggression is the new reality. That's what Venezuela has suffered, but there are threats to Colombia, Mexico and Greenland too. Trump says he wants freedom. He means his own freedom to get his hands on oil and natural resources. What has the EU done? One simple press release demonstrating subservience to the US, the same US that has discarded the far-right Corina Machado, who's no longer helpful, wanting to give her Nobel Prize to Trump. Humiliation for the right, and for Vox, violating international law, illegitimate and illegal intervention, while not speaking out about the genocide in Gaza.
Here is Mr. De La Valle for 1 minute on behalf of the left, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. In 2022 in this House, we expressed words of indignation and condemnation when Russia breached international law. Ambassadors were sent away, theatre shows were shut down, there's a ban on competitors in the Olympics, etc. But where are all of these supporters of international law now? They have fallen silent since the 2nd of January when Trump massacred hundreds of people and kidnapped Maduro. Venezuela is the tomb for the colonialist rhetoric of your double standards. No sanctions, no resolutions, no condemnation. It seems that the arbiter of international law is the sovereign in Washington, and Trump has basically said he wants the oil and he wants to return to the Monroe Doctrine. So the veil has been torn off. We have now seen the situation, and it's now up to the Venezuelan people, and only the Venezuelan people, to decide the future of the country. It's not a president who's nominated by Trump or the Sakharov Prize winner chosen by us in Parliament.
Europa redet, Amerika handelt. Donald Trump lässt...
Europe talks, America acts. He extricates the president of Venezuela. He wants to buy Greenland. It's all about the Donru strategy, natural resources, appropriating everything you can. He's abandoned all kinds of principles such as climate issues, doesn't believe in gender issues, and has abandoned humanitarian assistance to so many countries in the wake of COVID. It has to be said that Ursula von der Leyen is squandering money right, left and centre in all kinds of areas, which led to the economic demise of our continent, whilst Donald Trump is meeting with those who run oil companies in order to assure that he gains from Venezuelan oil resources. But the American economy is growing, and ours is quite the opposite. It is precipitating, and if we need to defend our place in the world, if we want to defend our place in the world, we need to do as Trump. We need to pursue our own interests, and we need to work with the abilities that we have. So end with this high-sounding moral talk and away with von der Leyen.
Of the political groups, we are running a little bit behind schedule. So I would encourage all of you to only use allowed speaking time. And during the next speaker, I will also close for the catch the eye, because I already have a lot there. But I will open the blue card option. And the next speaker is Mr. Bugallo for 1.5 minutes, please.
Madam President, Madam High Representative, this
was the first parliament in the world to refer to this victory for democracy in Venezuela in 2024. Despite criticism from elsewhere, 8 million Venezuelans left the country over 12 years, 12 million who were voting against fear, oppression, the dictatorship. There are over 1,600 political prisoners who need to be freed. Maria Corina Machado and President-elect Edmundo González should be received as they deserve. The future of Venezuela should only be in the hands of Venezuelans. The only way is democracy. On the 3rd of January, we should have had Venezuela on our minds, but we should have before and after, too. It doesn't end there either. Maduro was removed from Venezuelan soil. Venezuela is better off without him. But it's not just a change of face. It has to be a change of direction. We need elections. We need to defend those who win elections. Venezuela is not oil, not gold. It's not a protectorate. It is a country that has been waiting for freedom for far too long now and can wait no longer.
There is a blue card from Mr. Grasoulis. Do you want to take it, Grasoulis? We will continue with the speakers list, and the next speaker is Mr. Ruotolo for 1.5 minutes, please.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. High Representative. What's happened in Venezuela was a breach of international law. A military intervention is unilateral, arresting a sitting president. Maduro certainly is not a democrat. His regime is guilty of serious violations of civil rights and guilty of repression of the opposition. But none of that justifies military action. Not only can a democracy not be exported by bombs, but bombs kill and destabilize huge areas of this country, of this planet. If we really want to defend rights, I mean, how many countries do we need to intervene in? The democracies in this world can be counted on the fingers of one hand. Venezuela has huge oil reserves. Do we really believe that this is an operation against drugs trafficking? No. Trump's only interested in the energy resources. He thinks that Latin America is his backyard, and that's why we call for multilateralism, a role for the UN, and respect for sovereign states. If the law of the strongest prevails, then we have simply lost international law.
Blue card from Mr. Grasoulis. Do you want to take it? Blue card? Okay. No. Thank you. And we take the next speaker, and that is Ms. Jury for 1 minute, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's world speaks the language of power. We can grimace, shudder, or shake our fists, but that will not change anything. I recommend that we switch from being a slow-moving battleship to being a speedboat. I recommend the same approach in the case of Venezuela. Under the communist regime of Chavez and Maduro, the country has gone from being a paradise on earth to a poor country from which millions have fled, including hundreds of families fleeing to Hungary. It is an open secret that the state was run on the proceeds of drug trafficking, elections were rigged, and the regime was maintained by the military institutional structure of the Soles cartel. The left denies it for ideological reasons, but without the complicity of the Venezuelan state, drug trafficking could not be so widespread in the world. The US acted, sending a message to narco regimes. Europe, if it does not want fights between dealers in its streets like the gunfights in Antwerp and Brussels, then we should cooperate with the Americans to eradicate the drugs. Hungary has a zero-tolerance policy. Europe should adopt the same approach.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Junco Garcia for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. Alta comisionada, señorita Calas, señora Calas.
High Representative. Mr. Maduro was removed. He was extricated by the US government. He simply captured a fugitive, a narco-terrorist who had turned a prosperous country into a country of repression, misery and poverty. But we have to realize that we're talking about people. We're talking about 9,000 people who've had to flee, families who've had to leave Venezuela because they could see no hope. And Maria Corina Machado is the legitimately elected representative of the people, as is Edmundo González. The prisons are still full of political prisoners who must be released. Every single day that passes is a stain on our reputation because we have failed to support a proper transition, freedom for the prisoners and freedom for Venezuela, a future for the Venezuelans who need to have a free Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Strack-Zimmermann for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, Frau Präsidentin, meine Damen und Herren.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the great hope for people in Venezuela was actually disappointed. All he did is exchange one dictator for another. That's to say, the new vice president, Mrs. Rodriguez. This is a change of dictators, not a change of system. People should have had free elections immediately, but all we've had instead is this very embarrassing moment with the Nobel Peace Prize. So we should not be allowing this lawlessness to continue, but rather we should help the Venezuelans to strive for freedom and self-determination. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, we have an opportunity to oppose what Trump is doing. We have to put an end to what is going on.
Then the next speaker is Mr. Lagodinsky for 1 minute, please.
Colleagues, this moment in Venezuela is not just about one abduction. It's not about one regime and it's not about one country. It is a test for the rules that protect all of us. Yes, the capture of Maduro may feel right today, and honestly, my heart rejoiced with many Venezuelans when I heard the news, but feelings do not build order. Rules do. If international law becomes optional for the strongest, it vanishes for the weakest. And that's a problem. Yes, some prisoners were released, too few, too selectively, but repression remains. The system remains. And squeezing oil out of a despotic regime is no better than ruling by despotism. The truth is this: this was never about democracy. It was about power. And that is why Europe must lead. We must be the other, the better continent, not by force, not by silence, but by law, by unity, and by standing with Venezuela's democratic forces in their diversity and their feeling and longing for freedom.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Kyllönen for 1 minute, please.
Kiitos, arvoisa puhemies.
Madam President, well, not many people will say that they miss Maduro, but now we need to free the Venezuelan people. The structures of the state remain in place. The people has not got the power. It's still the old system that's in place. So this US operation has shown what it really is. It's not a case of reinstating democracy. It's of getting hold of resources. Venezuela's national resources belong to the Venezuelans and not to multinationals from abroad. The EU now has to pick sides. We should oppose political imperialism. We should be in favour of a genuine transition and genuine elections without interference or pressure from abroad. We have to stand up and assert the rights of peace and democracy. If we use power the way Trump has done it, basically giving him a carte blanche, then I don't think we should be surprised about the results.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Volgin. Sorry, for 1.5 minutes, please.
Уважаеми колеги,
Colleagues, the United States committed an unprovoked attack against Venezuela and kidnapped President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. In similar situations, EU leaders are usually outraged and call for punishment and sanctions, but now they're trembling and toothless, waiting for the next move of the big American brother. This is what happened. Nobody dares condemn this unprovoked aggression, and nobody dares fight for international law. It looks like bureaucrats defend international law only when it serves their interests. It is very typical of the collective West, actually. An infringement is an infringement only if the results are not convenient for the West. Both the leadership of the Commission and the majority of here at the European Parliament are acting quite inadequately. The majority here awarded the Sakharov Prize to Maria Machado, who decided to pass on her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump in order to get on the good side of him. It is quite clear that the leadership of the European Union is not choosing their favorites very well. Thank you.
Mr. Sieper, for 1 minute, please.
Liebe Menschen Europas,
dear people of Europe, sometime in the future I would like to have 2 children. I'd like to have a boy called Heinz and a girl who will be called Tilda. And one day in the future I will be telling them about this time in history, a time when an American president destroyed democracy and children were imprisoned in cages. A Venezuelan president was abducted by this person. Elections were stolen and the people were abandoned to starvation. I'll tell them that this was a turning point. It was a moment when Europe was prepared to stand up and be counted, to say it was going to defend the rules-based international order, not with deals, not with double standards, but with real principles and with real democracy, with the International Court of Law, where there was really going to be a belief in a democratic future, where Europe stood for rules as opposed to violence and power. Please help me to set up this system for the future for my children. Thank you.
That for 1.5 minutes, please.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. The fall of Maduro is long awaited for those who defend freedom and democracy. We've had sanctions on the regime for a long time, but Sakharov Prize to Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado. But the job is not over. High Representative, international pressure needs to continue. All political prisoners must be freed. Exiles must be able to return. Maria Corina should be able to govern, and those who are responsible for the atrocities of the Maduro regime must be brought to justice. But the socialists remain silent and complicit because some of them are connected to the regime. Former Prime Minister Zapatero and Sanchez now, who's calling for European sanctions to be lifted. But they didn't recognise the winners of the election. They didn't congratulate Maria Corina on the Nobel Prize. There were these suitcases with mysterious contents going to Spanish embassies, helping people out of Venezuela. What about international law there? What about the people of Venezuela? No, you didn't ask for dialogue when there were murders and torture, when the situation was atrocious. You're not arbiters of a democratic transition because you do not care about the democracy that means dignity for the people of Venezuela. And when the story of freedom and democracy is written, you won't be on any page, because when there was a choice between freedom and the opposite, you chose with those who were imprisoning people.
A half minute, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, the European Parliament and the S&D Group in particular condemn and have always condemned the murderous Maduro regime. And that is why it is our moral duty to also condemn the actions of the US and Donald Trump on the 3rd of January. That is a violation of international law. It's a violation of the Charter of the United Nations. For Donald Trump, it's not a question about people in Venezuela or democracy and freedom. No, all he's interested in access for oligarchs to the oil resources of Venezuela. Europe is a community of values. We stand up for values, for fundamental rights and human rights. We should insist on the strength of the law rather than the law of the strongest. And that applies everywhere, whether we're talking about the Russian attack on Ukraine or the Trumpian attack on Venezuela, or the attacks of the US on Greenland and European values and our union. So we need to send out a clear signal. We are on the side of the law. That means that Europe has to resist what the US government is planning. That means we need to use all of our instruments at our disposal, trade instruments, but political instruments as well. We need to do everything possible to resist this so that we can assert right and the law and not the law of the jungle.
Mr. Martin Frias, for 1 minute, please.
Muchas gracias, señorías.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, today the world is a bit freer. Venezuela is better off, and we can see a path to freedom and democracy. In Cuba and other regimes which repress freedom, we see what could have been the case in Venezuela, but things are now taking a positive turn there. The Trump regime has played a very positive and a very decisive role, and this is clearly a historic moment. Of course, a great deal still remains to be done. There are many prisoners who need to be released and many rights and freedoms which need to be restored. But the European Union must not just be a spectator. It is high time that the Commission, that the political parties came together to support Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and to end the financing which is being used to repress human rights. Thank you.
Maréchal, for 1 minute, please.
Il n'y a aujourd'hui que l'extrême.
Only the far left, nostalgic for Bolivarian socialism, is defending Maduro now. 75% of people are under the poverty threshold. It's got huge oil reserves. Venezuela has been hearing abstract speeches and rapid moral judgments, but now there's a reality here. For too long now, we have not had a strategic engagement in that region, but we have an important territory as France, Guyane, within the region. We need to defend our interests in the region. Is that through defending Chinese interests or working with the US to try to ensure that US interests are also French, also European? It's not only about drugs trafficking as an issue in South America. We have a huge space base, and we also have fossil fuel reserves which we need.
Speaker is Ms. Woutmans for 1 minute, please.
Dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter, mevrouw de hoge.
Thank you, President. High Representative, colleagues, the European Parliament has awarded the Sakharov Prize to the Venezuela opposition twice, in 2017 and in 2024, to Edmundo González and Machado. But what have we done since then, colleagues? We have actually been perplexed, sat and hesitated and not done anything. We've watched Machado getting closer to Trump out of absolute necessity, not out of conviction. Out of desperation, colleagues, out of desperation. And here we are in Europe, hesitating again, tiptoeing around whilst the world order is openly threatened by Trump. He is overturning the international order, international trade. Might is right. Democracy can be traded for geopolitical strength. We need democracy. We need elections in Venezuela, yes. It's not possible to justify what went on economically and politically under the Maduro regime, and therefore elections are the order of the day. Let this be a wake-up call, colleagues, and let Europe finally step up, please.
Speaker is Mr. Asens Yodra for 1 minute, please.
Que Estados Unidos bombardee un país.
It's one thing for the US to bomb a country in Latin America. It's nothing new. They've been doing it for decades, violating international law. The new thing is that they can't even be bothered to invent excuses now. They're not looking for alliances or resolutions. The gloves are off now. They want Venezuelan oil, they want Greenlandic rare earths. It's a new imperial order replacing law with brute force, and Trump talks like a dictator. He said the only limit on me is my own morality. He's a pervert, a narcissist. He should be in prison for coups, for paedophilia. He said the midterm elections shouldn't even be held. And here in this Parliament, Vox and the EPP are applauding. And if you don't condemn something, as the Commission is failing to do, then you condone it. You referred to the toppling of Maduro. It's a kidnapping. We have to call it a kidnapping. Even if he is a tyrant, you can't just go in and remove him. We have to face facts. This is a change to international law. We stand for international law.
Very much. Colleagues, I know that it's not long speaking time. You get each of one of you, but we need to respect the rules and giving space for most people. The next speaker is Mr. Oliveira for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner Kaya Kallas. The military aggression of the US against Venezuela and the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president have to be condemned because they are a violation of international law and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. They're a violation of the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. The response that we should be giving is to demand respect for international, for the sovereignty of the state and the freedom of the leader of Venezuela. The lack of condemnation from the EU for this attack by the United States is a complicity in this violation of international law, submission to the United States with terrible consequences when it comes to the geopolitical stage as a whole. It reveals double standards. The requirement to observe international law and the sovereignty of nations has to be maintained, to have a rule-based international order. This is being broken in the case of Venezuela. This operation does not respect international law. These are rules imposed by force, by those who have the military strength to do so. This cannot be the future of humanity.
Speaker is Mr. Stier for 1.5 minutes, please.
Presidenta, señora vicepresidenta. Primero.
President, Vice President, if you're a Democrat, you shouldn't shed a tear for Maduro. He was imprisoning political dissidents, he was engaged in drug trafficking, and there was a horrific impoverishment of the people of Venezuela. Dictators abuse power and do not respect international law. But if there's a systematic violation of the International Declaration of Human Rights, then the international community does not gain from such violations. There's been close cooperation with the Chavista dictatorship, and so they're in no position to lecture anyone on international law. Edmundo González was recognized as president-elect, although many chose not to vote on that occasion here in the European Parliament, and Mr. González and Ms. Corina Machado should be part of the transition to democracy in Venezuela. Napoleon said that you can do a lot with a bayonet, everything except sitting down on it. The use of force can remove a dictator, topple a dictator, but it doesn't make the transition process legitimate. That can only be done through democracy as led by Maria Corina Machado.
Speaker is Ms. Temido for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. High Representative, colleagues, the situation in Venezuela is devastating. The Maduro regime has been responsible for a serious political, economic and social crisis, marking the lives of the people of Venezuela with repression and suffering for over a decade. We've not forgotten this, but we also recall that the US's Operation Absolute Resolve was an illegal intervention under international law, which we strongly condemn. If you look at the history of Latin America, you can see the logic of the Monroe Doctrine and US interventionism, always leading to the imposition of agendas of interest, never to democracy. The way forward is neither through dictatorship nor imperialism. The future of Venezuela calls for an urgent democratic transition. The EU must take an active role supporting civil society above all, so that Venezuelans themselves can decide in a sovereign manner the future of their country. A word of concern for the welfare and safety of the population, and I'd like to mention Portuguese Venezuelans, a large community facing insecurity and scarcity for too long. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Ms. Tovaglieri for 1 minute, please.
La sinistra piange.
The left is rending its garments, but not because of what has actually happened, but because they've actually been freed of the dictator Maduro. The people who really are relieved that he is left are the people who've been forced to flee. Thousands of people have been expropriated. They've lost huge amounts of money, and much of the whole country is reduced to abject poverty, whereas it was one of the countries that was the richest the whole world over. Now you can't even go to hospital at all. And if you can, it costs money. The democracy that existed in the country is simply non-existent now. We've got to condemn this resoundingly. We must not be complicit with what was a ferocious dictatorship, because in fact it was aligned with the worst communist ideology of the world.
Do you want to take Tovaglieri? Ms. Tovaglieri, there's a blue card. Do you want to take that from Ms. Guara, seat 731, please?
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that we Greens have always supported our counterparts there who've been imprisoned in large numbers. Recently, we welcome the release of one of our colleagues, Alberto Tantini, from Italy. 423 days he was imprisoned in silence, and the diplomats in Italy did nothing until Trump extricated Maduro. So I would like to ask you, what is the deputy of Maduro actually doing, running the country of Venezuela under the thumb of Trump? Thank you. I don't quite understand what you're saying. I think Trump's strategy is simply that of supporting an opposition which has finally managed to overturn a desperately repressive regime and dictatorship. Your colleague was thankfully freed thanks to Trump's intervention and thanks to those who were able to bring to an end a regime which exiled 8 million Venezuelans. So neither wonder people are not protesting in favour of Maduro anymore. That's the reality.
Yes, Mr. Hollande, for 1 minute, please.
Signora Presidente, Madam President, High Representative, the Trump government is systematically demolishing all of the principles of the independence of countries and their national integrity. This is imperialists, sovereignism that just trying to make money and exert power. It's basically moving towards a state of world war. Maduro was responsible for systematic violations of human rights, but violating the integrity of a country with bloody military actions disguised as an international policing operation, just to try and get hands on oil resources, is not acceptable. High Representative, the largest democratic countries in the world have to deal with this situation. The International Criminal Court has to have a role here, because there is a need to look at the actions of countries like Israel, Iran, Russia and China, imperialist countries. The speaker is interrupted.
Now you have used
ruolo a sostegno del rispetto dei diritti.
Thank you. Thank you. Dear colleague, I have unfortunately have to close the microphone. You're speaking far much more than you're allowed to. The next speaker will be Mr. Georgiou for 1 minute, please.
The right have said Machado. Will the EPP say who will rule in Venezuela? Mrs. Callas, here we're not talking about Machado. We're not talking about Maduro. Here we're talking about an imperialist intervention and a mafia pirate action. Vice President Vance said it in Munich, a new sheriff in town, and you're scared, and you said Maduro, the anti-democrat, should go away. Yes, but together with Giuliani, with Erdogan, and the other so-called democratic regimes of the Gulf, where there are never elections, the arguments for the invasion in Venezuela are ungrounded, and the imposition of military control in Latin America and in the Caribbean. Full stop. The rest is just arguments for stupid people. Now, Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba are the next. The EU, remember Greenland and the international law. It's too late. If you allow for Trumpism to rule, international law is finished, as well as NATO, and tomorrow the EU itself. Venezuela is only the beginning. This snowball is arriving.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Ms. Petro for 1 minute, please.
For too long, Venezuela was like the man who mistook his reflection for his real self. There was a deliberate mechanism for repressing the country. Democracy and international law were subjected to that. But the people wanted something else. Whenever they were allowed to vote, they did go out to vote for something else. And the sovereign right to take their own decisions about their own future was something that was denied to them. Many lost all dignity and courage. This situation with political prisoners still in captivity cannot be tolerated any longer. If we believe in democracy, of course we have to defend that freedom. We should always choose to be on their side rather than on the side of tyrants. Long live a free Venezuela.
And the next speaker is Ms. Ince for 1 minute, please.
Venezuela has long faced a deep political and humanitarian crisis rooted in years of authoritarian rule. Nicolás Maduro did not have the democratic legitimacy, and yes, he is a dictator. The 2024 elections lack basic guarantees, and his government has long been responsible for serious human rights violations. But this cannot justify bonding international law and giving a green light to US unilateral military actions. Rule must always apply to all countries and in all situations, whether in Venezuela, Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, Syria or elsewhere. Selective respect for international law undermines the very order meant to protect all of us. EU must support the opposition, put pressure on the regime and use the sanction tools. We need to help people to take power, but not through violating the multilateral structures and international law that were put in place after the Second World War. International law is here to defend all of us and ensure that people like Trump cannot claim countries like Greenland either.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Kraus for 1 minute, please.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you, President. The narco-dictator Nicolás Maduro has been captured. He was dragged from his bed and ended up in prison in America. Life is full of surprises, Nicolás. But now is the point at which we need to focus on the interests of the Venezuelan people. Their future must be in their hands, not in the hands of the deep-pocketed oil companies. Criminals such as Delcy Rodriguez continue in government, and as long as this is so, there will be no proper democratic transition in Venezuela. This Chavez scum must go. The Venezuelans deserve a just and free democracy, free of the cancer of Chavism. Long live a free Venezuela.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Sofko for 1 minute, please.
Estimados colegas, el pueblo de Venezuela.
Dear colleagues, the people of Venezuela have been waiting for this for more than a decade. This opportunity to leave Maduro's regime behind and recover their own future. For years, Venezuelans have been living under repression and poverty in a country which actually has huge resources. But society was silenced and fundamental freedoms eroded. Following the latest presidential elections, indications were that the opposition had won. That's what the evidence said. But he clung on to power. He denied the people of Venezuela what they wished to see. They deserved to be able to choose their leaders freely. Venezuela needs a democratic transition, a genuine transition which is led by its own citizens on the basis of respect for human rights, rule of law, and peaceful democratic institutional transitions. It is only in such a way that Venezuelans will be able to decide on their own future and in that way bring peace, justice and prosperity to a country that has such great potential. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Pizzula for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'd like to stress that Nicolas Maduro doesn't have the legitimacy of a democratically elected president, and that conditions in Venezuela during his reign were dramatically difficult with serious violations of human rights. I hope that recent developments may enable democratic transition. The manner in which the space for change has been opened can be decisive. In all circumstances, the principles of international law and the Charter of the United Nations must be respected, including sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the prohibition of the use of force. Any unilateral action, including this by the USA, undermines the validity of international law, calls into question the sustainability of democratic transition. In order to establish stability and secure access to the oil reserves of Venezuela, Trump has clearly shown that they intend to reach an agreement with the remnants of Maduro regime and not support the democratic opposition. Venezuela's natural resources belong to its people, and they must serve above all to the fight against poverty and development.
Dear colleagues, Nicolas Maduro, who systematically undermined democratic institutions and silenced opposition, is not anymore in power. This is a positive step, but it cannot be seen as a solution for the future of the country. The transition to democracy can only be legitimate if it emerges from the Venezuelans themselves through free and fair elections, of course under international observation. Any solution imposed from the outside will lack the credibility and sustainability that true democracy requires. Around 8 million Venezuelans have fled their country. And over 80% of those remaining in the country are living in poverty, 50% of them in extreme poverty. And Venezuela was a rich country. It should become a rich country again. A peaceful and democratic transition to bring peace, justice and welfare to the people of Venezuela. That must be the aim.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Uriudain for 1 minute, please.
Commissioner Kallas, we are witnessing the descent of the United States into fascism. A president who rejects election results, incites insurrection, attacks the judiciary and the media, has an armed militia intimidating minorities, who kidnaps foreign leaders and threatens the sovereignty of others. If Trump smells weakness from the EU, it's because when the US or Israel break international law, we look the other way. History has taught all of us that the only thing a bully understands is strength and resolve. That means suspending the EU-US trade agreement, invoking the anti-coercion instrument, and standing by what we mean when we say never again. As an Irish MEP, I say this: The Taoiseach cannot engage in national humiliation on St. Patrick's Day in the White House. It's time to bury the cartoon Irish-American myth. No to the Shamrock ceremony. No to the US military use of Shannon. Yes to European solidarity and to the Primacy Commissioner of International Law.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Miljan Mon for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, President Ms. Callas. Following the fall of Maduro, the dictator, there's a lot of hope, but it's a crucial juncture. We need to provide support to those who want rule of law, respect for human rights and freedom. We need to help with the democratic transition. The people of Venezuela need to be able to decide their own future, as they did in the July 2024 elections. Freeing political prisoners needs to be ongoing. It is positive, but it's insufficient. Venezuela needs an inclusive dialogue, including the democratic opposition, represented by Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado, who clearly won the 2024 elections with 70% of the vote. The EU needs to maintain regular contact with those two individuals, and we also need to engage in coordination with Washington. The US is a crucial power. We need to act in a proactive way in order to bring our influence to bear, even if that is difficult. In the EU, we need to provide determined support to the people of Venezuela on their path to democracy and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker before Catch the Eye is Mr. Zarzalejos for 1 minute, please.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, President. High Representative, I number amongst those who feel no regret for the disappearance from power of an autocrat in Venezuela. He was a corrupt autocrat at the head of a repressive regime which led to 1/5 of the population fleeing into exile and abject poverty, unprecedented in that country. I also number amongst those who are gravely concerned that Trump's interests and those of the Chavista regime, interested in its own survival, may actually coincide to the detriment of and at the cost of the democracy which the majority, the immense majority of Venezuelans desperately dream of. We can say this because they voted in the elections of July 2024, but this is a presidential election which was stolen by Nicolas Maduro. And this is why he was no legitimate president of Venezuela, neither more is Ms. Rodriguez. The legitimate representative of the Venezuelans are Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado, and they are the only people who can legitimately represent the country. Thank you.
To Catch the Eye, I will take all 7 speakers who requested the floor, but please stick to your speaking time, 1 minute, and you take it from your seat. And we begin with Mr. Zazebav, seat 676, please.
Szanowna Pani Przewodnicząca, Pani Komisarz, Wysoka Przedstawiciel, no przede wszystkim mamy do czynienia z nowymi...
Yes, well, obviously we have new facts to deal with, and the first of those is that on the 3rd of January, there was the American operation which was initiated concerning Nicolas Maduro. A good piece of news, but obviously it is worrying for us. And before this chamber, I would just like to say that when it comes to the cooperation, the marginalisation of the opposition, the way this is being handled seems to mean that a democratic transition is going to be put off. And I'd just like to say here that in 2024 there were elections in Venezuela, and we know, of course, that Edmundo González won those elections, and he is the only eligible representative of the power who has a democratic mandate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Mai, seat 86, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. High Representative. In the context of this debate, I would like to shed the light on 3 islands, Aruba, Bonaire and Curaçao, that lie a mere 30 to 80 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela. These islands are part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and part of the EU overseas countries and territories. It is needless to say that what happens in Venezuela worries the people and the authorities of these islands, and it affects them politically, economically and in migration. Therefore, I would like to ask the High Representative if there is already contact with representatives of Aruba, Bonaire and Curaçao, either directly or via the Dutch government. And if not, are you willing and planning to do that? Because it is important to listen to the representatives of Aruba, Bonaire and Curaçao in shaping the policy of the EU in the region in general, but specifically now. We should not forget them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, also for sticking to the time. Next speaker is Ms. Sadone, seat 699, please.
La sinistra sta sempre dalla parte.
The left is always on the wrong side. We can see that there are demonstrations, and on the left they're defending a dictator that has killed people and jailed the opposition. Often the left has spoken highly of communist regimes in Venezuela and Cuba. How can the left talk about respecting human rights and democracy? We saw terrible images of the left that were congratulating them for what happened. Now, for those who have left Venezuela, we've heard how the situation was in their country. I cannot believe what is happening. This is pathetic.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Boylan, seat 374, please.
Thank you, Chair. The actions of the United States and Venezuela just illustrate the broader imperialistic stance of Donald Trump and his cronies towards Latin America. The reality is that they have kidnapped the Venezuelan head of state and his wife and have killed 83 civilians in the process. The actions of the United States are illegal under international law, and they are a thinly veiled attempt to engage in a large-scale resource grab in Venezuela. This is not about human rights. It's about oil and protecting power in the region. The EU's a la carte approach to international law is once again on display, and the failure of the EU's to condemn the actions of Donald Trump is pure cowardice. Only the Venezuelans should have the right to decide on their future. The EU must stand against US imperialism everywhere it rears its ugly head. And as for the Irish government, they need to kick the US military out of Shannon and defend Ireland's neutrality and protect international law.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Grasoulis, seat 525, please. Mr. Grasoulis, seat 525.
Keistai atrodo Europos parlamentas ir labai tuščiai diskutuoja.
The European Parliament looks odd. Cuba, Greenland, Venezuela. Nobody's listening. There's no international voice. If you want to be heard, you must carry out the politics of Trump. Be happy that this dictator was chased away, who threw people into prison. You are not condemning these people. What do you want? Trump is worse than any dictator? I welcome the fact that Trump is saying things the way they are. He acts rather than just speaking. Neither Putin nor China nor America respects the European Union.
6, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, when Steve Bannon back in 2017 gave the Nazi salute, when Elon Musk back in 2025 did the same, when Trump talked about Gaza and said that it would become a tourist destination, and you supported the genocide of the Palestinian people together with him, there was no reaction. There was no EU reaction given that international law was trampled on. When Trump went into Venezuela, because the Maduro regime didn't fall, let me say, there was an abduction. They kidnapped a leader. They violated the sovereignty of a country. Do you really understand what this means? This means that you tacitly condone this because you didn't react back then. But I think that there will be a problem in the future, and there is a problem in the future because look at what's happening in Greenland, because Sheriff Trump is here. Do not support Nazis any longer.
And the last speaker in Catch the Eye is Mr. Nicolau Alavanos, seat 810, please.
We condemn the military intervention in Venezuela carried out by the U.S. We have ridiculous pretext. It's all about getting their hands on the oil and making sure that the U.S. can compete against China and Russia that were more present in Latin America. We condemn the fact that this intervention was supported by the EU. We condemn the sanctions that have made living standards worse in Venezuela. And also, of course, the New Democracy government in Greece and other bourgeois parties are also supporting this and adopting the pretext given by the U.S. and saying this is in the name of democracy. This shows that the so-called international law is used as an alibi for imperialist interventions, and this leads to dangerous developments for the peoples. We increase our solidarity to the Venezuelan people. They're the only ones who can decide on developments in the country. So keep your hands off Cuba, because that is also at the target of threats, and they have to deal with the United States and their allies and their threats.
To the High Representative and Vice President Kallas to close the debate. The floor is yours, please.
Dear President, honourable members, Venezuela's democratic future and global security today demand an EU approach rooted in unity, principle and pragmatic resolve. Our objectives are clear: protecting EU citizens, upholding international law, defending and promoting democracy and human rights, and cooperating with partners, including, of course, the United States, to counter transnational organised crime. As events unfold, we need to state this clearly. The future of Venezuela must be decided by all Venezuelans themselves. The European Union will support the peaceful, negotiated and fully inclusive process that irreversibly restores democratic governance. We remain committed to support reconciliation, the reconstruction of democratic institutions and economic recovery that the Venezuelan people so urgently need. And we will work with all partners to achieve this. And yes, you are right, international law must be upheld, including the principles of territorial integrity and state sovereignty enshrined in the UN Charter. Let us act with unity, resolve and responsibility to assist Venezuelans in reclaiming democracy and stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And now the debate is closed. Give you all a couple of seconds to find your seat and get ready for the next debate.